confirmed infections in all 50 states. The normally busy Fisherman's Wharf in San Francisco is empty after local officials ordered roughly 8 million Californians to shelter in place. Here, a shopping mall in suburban Virginia closed indefinitely. Domestic air travel is collapsing too. This is a terminal at Salt Lake City's airport 2 weeks ago, and here it is on Monday. And the same is true with American car manufacturing. Ford, GM, and Fiat Chrysler are all suspending production at U.S. plants until March 30th. In Las Vegas, America's gambling mecca has gone quiet after the state took the unprecedented move last night of closing businesses, including hotels and casinos in the state, for 30 days. Governor Steve Sisolak.
This is only common sense. At a time when people are getting sick from simply being near others, is not the time for gyms to remain open. This is not the time for casinos to remain open.
And other nations around the world are taking similar measures, shutting down public spaces to limit the spread of this virus. In Antwerp, empty train stations and streets, as Belgium's prime minister today joined many European leaders and implemented a nationwide lockdown.
Les citoyens sont tenus de rester chez eux.
Citizens are required to stay at home in order to avoid maximum contact outside their immediate family, except to go to work, essential travel, going to the doctor, the grocery store, the post office, the bank, the pharmacy, to get fuel or to help people in need.
But traffic jams stretched for miles across other parts of Europe today, including the German-Polish border, after the European Union yesterday announced it is closing their external borders to non-EU citizens. And in hard-hit Italy, nearly 30,000 people have now tested positive, and over 2,500 people have died. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm William Brangham.
And we turn again to our Lisa Desjardins and Yamiche Alcindor. Yamiche, to you first. The president today invoked the Defense Production Act. He also enacted border restrictions. What do we know about how these measures are going to be used to fight this virus?
The president today said that he sees himself as a wartime president. And with that in mind, he said he was taking several emergency steps needed to stem the flow and stem the outbreak of the coronavirus. So he said he was going to be signing the Defense Production Act. Now, this act would allow the federal government to direct American manufacturers to produce items needed to fight the virus, including masks or gloves or gowns. Now, the president said he signed that just in case he had to invoke it in worst case scenario. Only a few minutes ago, he tweeted that. So it isn't that this is happening right now. The other thing to note, though, what is happening right now is that the president is putting in new travel restrictions for the northern and southern border. That's the borders of Canada and Mexico. Here's a bit of what the president is going to be doing and is doing to put up there. The president is going to be enforcing something that is an immediate removal of anyone who's crossing those borders that are undocumented. People aren't going to be being taken to facilities or courts. There's going to be no due process. People are just going to be immediately removed. The other thing is the people that are exempt are Americans and Canadians and people with proper documents. That means people with green cards or with work permits. They're going to be allowed to come in. And last, this does not include goods and trade. The president made it clear today that he doesn't want this to impact the trade with Mexico and Canada. But there are people, of course, that are pushing back, saying that this is unlawful. But the president and the Trump administration say they're happy and willing to fight this in court if needed, because they say that this is a public health need and that the borders need to be shut down, at least to the people that I just described.
Yamiche, today at the briefing at the White House, you asked the president how the White House is characterizing this virus and how long it's going to last. Tell us about that exchange and what he said.
Well, the president has been getting pushback for using the term Chinese virus. And there was also a White House official who referred to the coronavirus as Kung flu. So I questioned the president about whether or not he thought those terms were wrong. Here's what he said. A person at the White House used the term Kung flu. My question is, do you think that's wrong, Kung flu? And do you think using the term Chinese virus, that puts Asian Americans at risk, that people might target that?
No, not at all. I think they probably would agree with it 100%. It comes from China. There's nothing not to agree on.
Now, the president said that he wants to continue to use the word and term Chinese virus because he thinks, yes, this virus started in China. He also says China was trying to blame the United States and U.S. service members for the virus starting in China. The other thing to note is I questioned the president about whether or not the coronavirus outbreak in the United States might last as long as 18 months. That's what some reports have been saying. The president said that's not correct. He doesn't think it's going to last that long. But Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin did say that the unemployment rate could go up to 20%. That, of course, would be a big, big number. And people are very, very worried about that. But the president is saying the federal government is doing all that it can do so that those things will not happen.
Interesting. And so, Lisa, now over to you. Things are moving really fast at the Capitol in terms of figuring out ways to help people, to help businesses. Tell us where everything stands right now.
Judy, I think overall, think of the Capitol as a place that is trying to shore up a dam that is cracking in the middle of an earthquake. They are trying to deal with now layoffs starting to come to the economy at the same time as they know future problems are going to be worse, and they're not sure what tools exactly can fix these problems. So let's go over exactly where we are. First of all, today, as William reported, the Senate passed the Family's First Act that goes to the president now. A reminder again, that helps deal with sick time for people who have the virus or are quarantined, and family leave for those caring for children at home, as well as testing and some food aid. Now, what's next is that $1 trillion stimulus plan. It could be more than $1 trillion, Judy. And today, as Republicans gather to try and figure out their plan, outside came a new idea from Senators Lindsey Graham and Mitt Romney. They would like to focus on unemployment insurance to the tune, Judy, of perhaps 75% of people's salaries up to $80,000. That's just one idea, but it looks like that idea of looking out for those who lose their jobs is emerging as a top factor in any of the next plans.
So on the part of that addresses small businesses, what do you see emerging there?
This seems to be the most clear consensus point in all of the parties, is that small businesses who may already be worried about going out of business this week need more help. There is a plan emerging from Senators Rubio and Collins in the Republican Party that would actually give federal loans to those small businesses to help them continue to operate so long as those businesses use that money for payroll and operations, Judy. This plan would later forgive those loans, essentially make this a grant to perhaps thousands and thousands of small businesses around the country. The cost of that, Judy, $300 billion. But there is clear concern for small businesses more than almost any other sector of the economy right now here in the U.S. Capitol.
So interesting. All right. So I want to ask both of you quickly, because you've both been reporting on this, and that is Bernie Sanders. Obviously, he came in behind in these latest primaries that took place yesterday. Both of you have been in touch with his campaign. Yamiche, what are you hearing about what his next plans are?
So the Bernie Sanders campaign and the senator himself have been pushing back very hard on the idea that he is ending his campaign anytime soon. They said that any reports of that are false. I've been talking to sources that are close to Bernie Sanders who say that he recognizes that his path is nearly impossible to winning the nomination, but that he wants to look at how he can possibly push Joe Biden further to the left and push some more progressive ideals. But today, the senator was very, very angry in a way that I haven't seen him in the years that I've been covering him, because he even said an expletive to a reporter who was asking him about whether or not he would be ending his campaign sometime soon.
And Lisa.
Yeah. And, Judy, I was there. Actually, that was part of a conversation I was having with Senator Sanders. I asked Senator Sanders for comments on the race. He said no comment. I moved on to ask him about the pandemic. He had a lengthy conversation with me. I think the longest he's spoken to a reporter in a few days about his concerns with the pandemic. That's obviously a top priority to him. Other reporters joined in, asked him again about the race, asked him repeatedly. And that was when he had that pushback. He turned to them and said, "Why are you asking me this? We are in the middle of and he used a strong word, crisis." Yeah, it tends to me that he obviously is very focused on the crisis. I asked him about the election and the crisis, and that clearly is on his mind too. He has a lot of concerns about how the election goes forward. What he himself does, unclear, but he is factoring in the pandemic into all of his thoughts. That much we can say.
The only thing better than having one of you reporting on Bernie Sanders is having both of you reporting on him. Thank you, Lisa, and thank you, Yamiche. Yeah. We appreciate it. Economic damage from this virus keeps piling up amid talk of sweeping financial aid. The Dow Jones Industrial Average, as we reported, crashed again today, losing more than 1,300 points to close below 19,900. The Nasdaq fell 345 points, and the S&P 500 gave up 131. For insight into all this, I'm joined once again by David Wessel, director of the Hutchins Center on Fiscal and Monetary Policy at the Brookings Institution. David, welcome back to the program. So it seems that no matter what Congress does, and we've heard from Lisa reporting on that, the markets, the investors just don't seem to be reassured. Is that what's going on?
Right. I think that what we're seeing is the markets and investors are, they're realizing there's a lot of uncertainty. Secondly, they're extremely risk averse. No one wants to hold any risky assets. And they're thinking that this might go on for a while and it might do some long-lasting harm to the economy. It seems like an overreaction, but without any clear idea if this is going to be 2 quarters, 3 quarters, or 4 quarters, I think people are really just panicking.
And you were sharing with us that you've seen some forecasts that have come out today, which contribute to the panic.
Absolutely. I mean, JP Morgan, a big bank on Wall Street, their economists predicted that the second quarter of the year will see a decline in the U.S. GDP at a 14% annual rate. We've never had a quarter that bad since we started keeping track of quarterly GDP in 1947. Now, I should note that they expect a bounce back in the third quarter. I hope they're right. But we really don't know how long this is going to go on.
Do we have a sense at this point of which sectors are going to be the hardest hit? I'm asking because we're hearing small businesses, big businesses laying off, shutting down, at least for the time being.
Well, when you basically tell everybody to stay home, it's not hard to imagine which businesses suffer first: hotels, tourism, airlines, and stuff like that. But I think that it's going to be widespread. And one of the problems that the government's going to have is every business is going to be able to say, we're hurting and it's not our fault. So they're going to have to make some tough decisions about who to help, who not to help, how to get paid back, who gets a grant, who gets a loan.
So what does it take at a time like this? And I realize what you're saying is we've never seen anything like this. What does it take, though, at a time like this to give people some sense of reassurance? I mean, to know there is a bottom here.
Well, I think one of the challenges of this event is that by flattening the curve, by spreading out the virus, we're doing on purpose damage to the economy. And that's going to be very upsetting to people. I think people want leadership. They want confidence if they get sick, they can be treated. And they want to be able to pay the rent or pay the light bill and stuff like that. And that's why there's a lot of talk about providing cash to households, giving money to people who may be furloughed, strengthening the safety net in order to make sure that the most vulnerable among us don't really get hit hard.
How much does it help? I mean, this is, I think, part of your answer, that there is clarity in what the government, in the measures the government is taking.
I think it'll help a lot to get clarity. It's been very confusing. Some of the advice from the White House podium has been confusing, all this back and forth between the House and the Senate. So I think as soon as we get some clear idea of what's going to be in this big bill, this $1 trillion stimulus, people will begin to see what's it going to mean to me. What are they going to do? But I think a second important thing is I hope that they build into this bill a trigger so that if this is prolonged, the aid will automatically be extended. One of the things we learned during the Great Recession is if you're not pessimistic enough and the stimulus stops, then the economy takes a hit. So we want this one to be automatic. If unemployment rises and stays high, we might have more checks to people or more loans to business.
Is it possible, finally, David, to be able to say how much it's going to take to reassure folks?
I don't think it is possible. I can't tell you how long this is going to go on, how long I'm going to have to be working at home. And that's true for everybody. So I think that the government needs to do things now, both to alleviate the pain and to put some money in the system so that when the pandemic does recede, as it is apparently doing in China, the economy can get restarted again. But, you know, uncertainty is really hard for people to adjust to. And when people tell you, oh, this is going to be over by the summer, I think we've all learned that those people don't know what they're talking about. So it's not very comforting.
1.3 trillion, and I hear you saying it could be bigger.
Absolutely.
Bigger and bigger. David Wessel, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
A new analysis by researchers at Harvard University shows that the bed capacity of hospitals in many parts of the U.S. will be overwhelmed if the COVID-19 coronavirus continues to spread across the country. And as Amna Nawaz reports, hospitals and healthcare systems are working to increase their readiness.
Judy, the Harvard study indicates that when spread over a 12-month period, even a moderate number of coronavirus cases will begin to fill some American hospitals to capacity unless they free up already occupied beds. The faster the pace of infection and the larger the numbers grow, the greater the shortfalls become. For what hospitals are doing to prepare themselves and what more needs to be done, I'm joined by two people who focus closely on preparedness. Jeremy Konyndyk is a senior policy fellow at the Center for Global Development, whose research focuses on global outbreak preparedness, among other things. He joins us by Skype. And here in the studio, Dr. Bruce Siegel. He's the president and CEO of America's Essential Hospitals. That's an association of more than 300 hospitals and healthcare systems. And welcome to you both. Dr. Siegel, I want to start with you here. We know there will be a surge of patients. We know that's coming. You told my colleague earlier, our hospitals are moving quickly to prepare for that. What specifically are they doing right now, and are you confident they'll be ready?
So the good news is that millions of health professionals in our hospitals are working hard to prepare. They are clearing out some of the elective surgery cases, things that don't have to be done right now, to get that space ready for a surge in patients. They are expanding their capacity, bringing beds and floors back into use that were maybe not used, building tents for triage centers and testing in their parking lots to keep sick patients away from the rest of their patient population. There's a lot going on.
How confident are you they're going to be ready to meet with the expected surge?
I think that they will do a good job of meeting that surge. I think if we as citizens also try to make sure that surge is as small as possible by distancing ourselves from each other as we're doing right now, that'll help a huge amount. My concern will be, will they have the resources for a sustained response? And that's going to be something that Congress is going to have to really think hard about and act on in the days ahead.
Jeremy Konyndyk, let me ask you about this. Some people will look at the maps on this, and it's very alarming when you see how much of the country and how many of our hospitals could become overwhelmed. Those darker red portions, by the way, represent over 1,000% capacity for some of those hospitals, and that's in a moderate scenario. Tell me how you're looking at this. Do you believe the healthcare system and the hospitals can get to the capacity they need to handle even a moderate surge?
I think it's going to be an enormous struggle, and it's complicated by the fact that we've already lost quite a bit of time. We should have begun the process of this as soon as we saw what was happening in Wuhan, China in mid-January, the way that hospitals and modern hospitals there were overwhelmed very rapidly by this virus. We're going to face struggles with PPE. We're going to face struggles with healthcare workers becoming infected. We have lost a lot of time. I think there are measures that we can begin to take. Some of the things that the president announced today are positive. It would have been better if they'd been announced a month ago. So we're kind of in catch-up mode still.
What did you hear today that was positive?
Well, I think the Defense Production Act, I think the moving of the hospital ships, all of those things help somewhat to relieve the pressure. But they're also, it's going to take a while. I mean, we learned after the announcement that one of the hospital ships won't be ready to leave port for a few more weeks. Obviously, Defense Production Act work, if you start telling a company now to start manufacturing ventilators or N95 masks, that's not going to show up in the supply chain for weeks or months.
Dr. Siegel, the PPE that Jeremy mentioned, that is personal protective equipment, that is what your frontline healthcare workers need.
Absolutely.
To be able to protect themselves
Yes.
when they're handling those patients. Are you close to having what you need, and how dependent are you on the federal government to get that supply?
So we are not close to having what we need. We're already seeing some spot shortages in some areas, and that could get worse, a lot worse, as the surge materializes. We are very dependent on the federal government for making this happen. And I'm glad that there are, things happening now to start to get manufacturing up, and to start to divert resources to this sector. But my biggest concern is that we have, stressed safety net hospitals in this country, stressed rural hospitals with maybe a week of cash on hand. As they lose their paying business, as they see a spike in uninsured patients coming in, as they have to, spend millions and millions on treating sick coronavirus patients, they're going to run out of resources. They will literally could run out of money. And we're going to need Congress to make sure that we have that backstop to be there for these communities, given how sobering it's going to be.
The other thing people hear a lot about are ventilators and the need for critical care in severe cases. Do you have the ventilators you need? Are you confident you'll get the supply that you need?
We are working as hard as we can to make it happen. We need the government to step in. Are we sure we'll have what we need? No, we're not. Let's be very clear about that. And I'm glad that we're preparing and moving all the things we need to in place, like the hospital ship. So that's going to take longer than we expected. But we still have a long ways to go. And the decisions we make in the next few days around resources, around this stimulus bill, are going to be absolutely critical so we can really do this for the long haul. Because this may go on longer than some of us would ever like.
Jeremy, you mentioned that Defense Production Act the president put into place today. To what degree do you think that will fill this gap Dr. Siegel is saying that we know we have right now? And what other levers of the federal government could we be pulling and using right now if needed?
Yeah, I think the Defense Production Act it basically forces companies to manufacture certain things. I think the companies would probably be inclined to manufacture those things anyway if it keeps their factories running and if there's money behind it. So I think it's a helpful tool. It probably isn't a total game changer. One of the things I'm still hearing about from a lot of the doctors I talk to in New York City and in Northern California is lack of testing. They are still struggling to get the testing that they need, both for their patients, but also for themselves. If they are exposed, it's quite important they be able to get a test quickly to determine whether they're infected or not, because if they're infected, they have to go into quarantine. If they're not, they can stay at work. Right now, if you can't tell, you have to take the precaution and you lose them from the workforce.
Jeremy, when you see the president speaking now, you see a number of different officials from different agencies working together and working behind him. Are you confident that every single element, every single resource at the government's disposal is being used right now, or are there other steps they could be taking right now?
I'm not confident, and I think I think they have made some headway, but they're still not where they need to be. We were in a sort of inactive mode for about the first month and a half of this, where we were really not moving out in an expeditious way on preparing the homeland for the arrival of this virus. I think we've now moved into reactive mode, but we're still not in proactive mode. So yes, they're starting to get some things in motion, but they're still playing catch up. And I think it's hard to have confidence in the overall management of this, given what we've seen so far, but I hope it will improve.
Dr. Siegel, when we see some of the projections, obviously, as Jeremy said, there's a lot we don't know. We don't know how long it will take. We don't know when the surges will happen, when those viruses will peak. How do hospitals prepare for this? Do they go for the worst case scenario, or do they hope for a mild outbreak?
Oh, you have to think about the worst case scenario. So our hospitals are really thinking about how bad could this get? Realizing that it may get bad in one community now, and maybe it'll get worse in another community, some weeks later. But they have to be prepared for the worst, or at least do their best to get to that point. We can't be, optimistic, or hope is not a policy here. We've got to really, and I'm confident they are, our hospital leaders and nurses and doctors prepare for how bad this could be, even though we hope to avoid it by doing the things we're trying to do right now.
We all hope those plans will come together. Dr. Bruce Siegel and Jeremy Konyndyk, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
And please join us tomorrow when we are hosting a virtual town hall confronting coronavirus at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 Central on all PBS stations and streaming on the PBS app and on the PBS NewsHour social channels, including YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Please watch to hear some of your questions answered by people who are on the front lines of the crisis. In the day's other news, Alabama postponed a Republican primary runoff for a U.S. Senate seat because of the coronavirus. It is being delayed until July 14th. The race pits former U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions against Tommy Tuberville, a former Auburn University football coach. The winner faces Democratic Senator Doug Jones, the incumbent, in November. A diplomatic feud between China and the U.S. escalated today. Beijing defended its expulsion of 13 journalists with the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Wall Street Journal. It cited tighter controls on Chinese state-run media organizations in the U.S. But President Trump denounced the Chinese response.
Yeah, I'm not happy to see it. I don't, I have my own disputes with all three of those media groups. I think you know that very well. but I don't like seeing that at all. I'm not happy about that at all.
At the same time, U.S. officials accused China today of hiding information on the initial outbreak of the coronavirus. Back in this country, an earthquake rocked several million people around Salt Lake City, Utah this morning. There were no major injuries, but the tremor and the aftershocks damaged some buildings and knocked out power to thousands. The city's airport also shut down for a time. And the famed Alaskan sled dog race, the Iditarod, finished today. Thomas Warner of Norway crossed the finish line in Nome just after midnight, beating his closest competitor by 5 hours. Small crowds turned out despite coronavirus concerns. Congratulations to him. Still to come on the NewsHour, on the ground in Iran, where state officials warn that millions of people could die in the pandemic. Plus, celebrated cellist Yo-Yo Ma on songs of comfort in a time of crisis.
This is the PBS NewsHour from WETA Studios in Washington and in the West from the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at Arizona State University.
One of the countries hardest hit by COVID-19 is Iran. Thousands there have the virus, and the death toll is skyrocketing amid preparations for a subdued Iranian New Year. The conflict with the United States is now never far from mind there. As special correspondent Reza Sayar reports from Tehran, coronavirus and that confrontation make for a volatile mix.
Once a year, in the streets of Tehran, Haji Firuz welcomes the first day of spring and Nowruz, the Iranian New Year. Like Santa Claus, this soot-covered fictional character's job is to spread holiday joy. But this year, he's not seeing many smiles.
It's the worst New Year ever. I've played Haji Firuz for 20 years. This is the first time I've seen it like this. They're not in a good mood.
A good mood is hard to find in Iran these days. The coronavirus outbreak is exploding. The daily death toll is hitting triple digits. More than 17,000 Iranians have tested positive. Mahmoud Sadeghi is among more than 36 public officials who caught the virus. The lawmaker recovered last week. He spoke to us by video chat.
I had totally surrendered to my destiny. I even started writing my will. I almost finished.
Sadeghi says he's heeding the government's call to stay home. Many Iranians are doing the same. Tehran streets, usually bustling with New Year traffic, are nearly empty. With the coronavirus, a lot has changed.
But here's what hasn't changed. At a time when the UN is calling for global cooperation to fight the coronavirus, Tehran and Washington are still in conflict, still damning one another, and some say edging closer to war.
Last Wednesday marked the birthday of Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian general assassinated in January in a U.S. drone strike. On Soleimani's birthday, a rocket attack hit a military base in Iraq, killing 2 American soldiers. One day later, the Pentagon launched airstrikes, targeting Iranian-backed Shia militias, saying they were responsible.
Things are getting worse.
Tehran-based political commentator Mohammad Hashemi says, at a time when both countries should be focusing on containing a pandemic, war seems closer than ever.
This was the worst time for such things happen, because everybody feared of another war in the region. And then in the middle of the crisis that Iran is trying to deal with this coronavirus outbreak.
Tehran and Washington are feuding over the coronavirus too. Yesterday, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo accused Iran of covering up the outbreak.
Instead of focusing on the needs of the Iranian people and accepting genuine offers of support, senior Iranians lied about the Wuhan virus outbreak for weeks.
Last week, the Washington Post cited satellite images to report authorities in Iran raced to dig trenches at a cemetery in the city of Qom in an effort to hide the death toll. The site was so vast, the Post said, it was visible from space. Other news organizations picked up the story, some calling the site a mass grave.
Well, I was shocked and terrified.
Habib Abdul Hussein is a reporter at Press TV, Iran's state-funded English-language news network. He says the site was no secret and prepare to accommodate the Islamic custom of burying loved ones within 24 hours.
Satellite images cannot prove that a mass grave exists somewhere or not.
Do you understand that some of the critics of the Islamic Republic of Iran say that Press TV is the state's news network and they don't cover it objectively?
Of course, yes, of course. I cannot deny that there have been mismanagement. Definitely there have been mismanagement, dysfunction in Iran and other countries. But this is something that happens either in Iran or in Italy. This is not fair. They're just trying to blame Iran and pile up pressure on Iran.
This report, written by a local reporter in Qom 3 weeks prior to the Washington Post report, announced preparation of roughly 100 graves at the same cemetery for victims of the virus, suggesting the site was not a secret. Numerous pictures posted on social media and the cemetery website also show the site was prepared just as other graves are prepared in Iran. Perhaps no voice in Iran is more objective when it comes to the coronavirus than the World Health Organization. They neither represent the Iranian government nor U.S. interests. They're working to contain the virus, and they granted us an interview.
Sign says no entry without wearing a mask. So we're going to put on our mask. There have been critics of the Iranian government who say they haven't done enough. They reacted too slow. What is your response to those allegations?
2 weeks ago, the response was a bit more difficult because there were only 2 or 3 countries which had self-sustained epidemic. So there was a lot of focus and what do they do different or maybe wrong or not to that scale as others. That kind of debate has vanished to a largest degree.
Are you satisfied with the response here?
I'm very satisfied with the response in terms of the planning. The national plan has really all the components we are recommending a national plan should have.
Here on the eve of every last Wednesday before the new year, Iranians hold a festival of fire. They cast aside bad luck and look forward to happier days. With the coronavirus, many celebrate it from inside their homes. For them, happier days will come if Tehran and Washington can ever set aside their differences.
This is not the time for politics to be injected into the daily challenges of people.
And share in the fight against a growing pandemic. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Reza Sayah in Tehran.
As Congress weighs relief packages meant to blunt COVID-19's impact on the U.S. economy, lawmakers are also dealing with new problems the virus is creating in their home states. Senator Bill Cassidy, a Republican from Louisiana, is one of them. His state has at least 250 confirmed cases of the coronavirus, and so far, 7 people have died. He's also one of 3 medical doctors currently serving in the Senate, and he joins us now from Capitol Hill. Senator Cassidy, thank you so much for being with us. So the legislation the Senate passed today, providing free testing, paid sick leave, help for some of the poorest Americans. How much do you think this is going to alleviate the hit many Americans are going to be taking now?
I'm not sure. The goal is to alleviate it as much as possible, but this is only the second of at least 3 packages. If there's something that we can do that has not been done in the first 2 packages, we shall do it. I mean, the American people need to know that Congress is there with them, and as much as we can, we're going to get our nation through this rough patch.
Well, we know that there's a second package being worked on, $1.3 trillion. It would include direct cash payments, among other things. How confident do you think Americans can be that these pieces of legislation are going to help people who are most in need?
They're going to pass. And if you're speaking about a direct payment, when I speak to a family, they're concerned about their mortgage, their car note, how are they going to buy groceries, particularly an issue for the lower income, less likely to have savings. That's where the money will be targeted. Mnuchin says we can have it out by the end of the first week in April. Well, oftentimes mortgage payments are due the first week in April. So we hopefully will get relief there. but we're also trying to do other things that help businesses that employ people through this rough patch. And so if you come back and you don't have a job, that's not good. So we're trying to help that small business so that she can stay in business and that she can keep her employees as employees. So on all levels, we're trying to address this.
You know, the American people are so used to looking at Washington, looking at dysfunction, frankly, looking at the two political parties fighting with each other rather than working together. What are we going to see right now? I mean, is this going to be an example of the two parties actually working together for a change?
We are in this together. And let me speak of another divide. Sometimes there's a divide between what people who are not in Washington think and what people in Washington think. I can tell you now, speaking as a doctor, if somebody at home decides to self-quarantine, maybe they have symptoms, maybe not, they don't expose 6 other people potentially to coronavirus, they've had more of an impact on stopping the spread of the disease than all the doctors and nurses in your community, because we don't have an effective treatment. The best way to treat is not get infected. So I would say not only will there be unity between Republicans and Democrats, but there'll be unity between people in Washington and folks who are at home who send us to Washington. We have to have common cause if we're going to defeat this disease.
Senator Cassidy, as a physician, you obviously know a lot about what's going on here. How worried are you about what lies ahead? And do you think the American people now have the full picture of what's coming?
I think the American people are grasping it. And it seems a little surreal, but it is coming home when you see that my state of Louisiana now has 257 confirmed cases and 7 deaths. 9 days ago, we had 1 case. Now we have 257. It is spreading. So I think that's coming home. I'm very worried. This has the potential to follow the track of what has happened in Italy, where there is a rapid increase in the number of cases and the hospital system becomes overwhelmed. I will say I'm working closely with the White House, closely with my governor, all levels of government to see what we can do to expand capacity. But ultimately, Judy, if somebody doesn't go out, does not infect another, that has tremendous impact upon whether that other person will live. Flatten the curve, if you will.
Let me ask you about public health facilities, the ability of the healthcare facilities in your state of Louisiana to handle what's coming in terms of hospital beds, in terms of ventilators, whatever else is going to be needed. Is there the capacity now to deal with what's coming in Louisiana?
If it happens as it happened in Italy, nobody is going to have the capacity, where you just had an exponential rise in the number of cases. If we're able to flatten the curve and people accept the disruption in their lives for the next few weeks or maybe a month or so, then we can flatten the curve and we will have capability. So I think it really depends upon what we do as a nation. If we stay at home, care for other people, if we have symptoms or not, just stay at home, don't expose others, we will have capacity. If not, we will be overwhelmed.
We saw today, Senator, the president issuing an executive order having to do with prioritizing, allocating health and medical resources. How much of a difference is that going to make?
It's going to make a huge difference. Right now, I'm continuing to hear that folks back home cannot get viral transport medium to take their swab that someone's taken for the virus to actually get tested. Masks are in short supply, personal protective equipment. I could go down the list, but we need those things. We need them rapidly. Ventilators are being purchased, but I'm sure there's going to be a back order for that sooner or later. Go down the list of what is needed. We need more of it.
And when it comes to prioritizing, how do you look at that as a question facing the healthcare profession?
We have to get more testing. We have to protect medical providers. Medical providers are a limited capacity. We can't open up an old hospital and create more beds if you don't have the nurses and the doctors and the techs and everyone else it takes to run those. So we have to protect our medical professionals. It's so gratifying. My colleagues are frontline. They want to be frontline, but we've got to keep them healthy, because if they're not healthy, they can't take care of patients. We need them taking care of patients.
And finally, Senator, President Trump has called this the Chinese virus. You're not using that term. Why not?
This is something which happens regularly, where a virus moves from one animal into human beings. The Chinese physicians have been outstanding in sharing medical information with the rest of the world. And I was just, before you got on, reading several New England Journal of Medicine articles published by Chinese about whether this medical therapy works, what's the impact of children. I could go on. Speaking now as a physician, the international collegiality among healthcare workers has been fantastic. And just as we need Washington to work well with the parties and with people who are not in Washington, our medical community has to work well internationally because this is an international issue. We are truly in it together.
Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, we thank you very much.
Thank you, Judy.
At a time of national and indeed global trauma, a leading artist offers us songs of comfort. Jeffrey Brown has that for our ongoing arts and culture series, Canvas.
He is one of the world's most renowned and beloved musicians, and now he is reaching out in a new way in this current crisis. Cellist Yo-Yo Ma recently began posting videos of himself performing short pieces and songs that can speak to those most in need and to all of us. Yo-Yo Ma joins me from his home in Massachusetts by Skype. And Yo-Yo, it's nice to talk to you. Here we are. You're stuck at home like most of us, but you're still playing. Tell us about this idea that you have the project called Songs of Comfort.
Well, this idea came by pretty much spontaneously. I was in the office one day and we were talking and said, let's do something in this time that actually serves people's needs. And we thought that somehow music always has been comforting to me. This is what I do. And this is the best that I can offer. And I know many people are doing everything they can from what they know. And this is just something that I can do.
This is what you do? I mean, in what sense? What's your sense of what music or art can do? I mean, we talk about this all the time. People have real needs. We've just had a whole program talking about hospitals and medical needs and food and money, of course. What can music and art do?
Well, I can tell you one thing. When I was 19, I had a teacher who said, Yo-Yo, you haven't found your voice. I said, okay. And so I kept looking for my voice. And I think my voice
I've heard something like that too.
The needs of others.
Behind the scenes.
And then
with the new quantum financial system. Partnership with Google. Okay, that's probably one of the most exclusive, biggest partnerships there is in the space, guys. So for that reason, ignore Hedera Hashgraph. And I also heard it's going to be part of the new quantum financial system. It states on CoinDesk. Now, CoinDesk is controlled by the Federal Reserve. Okay, CoinDesk, Kenton Lewis. Okay, he's very smart. He's got a couple reports. I could show you. I'll show you a few of his reports. Man, he dives deep, and he dives deep, and he actually does. He puts out facts, and he dove deep, and he found out that CoinDesk, Ripple, Zcash, Bitcoin, they're all controlled by the Federal Reserve, okay? Because they're controlled by Digital Currency Group, which was created by the Federal Reserve. And for that reason, Blockstream is the core software for Bitcoin. And that is controlled by the Federal Reserve, okay, guys? So CoinDesk is controlled. Okay, it's all controlled. Anything on Coinbase is controlled by the Federal Reserve. It all centers around Coinbase, guys. So all the coins that are on Coinbase or potentially going to be listed on Coinbase will succeed because those are the ones that go through regulatory scrutiny. Okay, and that's what we're looking for. What's up, Red Dog Leader? Barney Q fan. Fun is very good. I'm not big on gambling coins. I don't know, casino coins and stuff like that. I'm just not good. I'm not big on gambling. That's one of the only addictions I've never had, you know, besides crypto. Crypto's kind of gambling, but it's smart gambling. Going to the casino and stuff. I went to the casino once, and I was like 18, so I snuck in, and my friend gave me $20 to spend, and I lost it in 2 minutes, and then I was like, well, that wasn't fun. And then I went out to the car and just sat there for a couple hours, and then they all came out, and you know, I never went back. You know, it wasn't any fun, you know, so maybe it was a blessing. But I'll tell you what, this crypto is fun. You can make a lot of money doing this, and if you read, you will make a lot of money. You just have to research. That's it. That's why we have the internet. Could assets be seized if the economy gets that bad? Apparently, they can reach into our bank accounts and take our money. That's why I say get cash out of your bank account if you can. They signed a new law in 2009 that said that you can do that. If the banks need to be bailed out bad enough, they will actually freeze your account and they'll take your money, and then they'll be like, "Oh, we'll give it to you later." But if you need your money, you need your money. So if it does get bad enough, you know, that's why I would take as much cash out as possible. That's what I do. That didn't get a sniff here. That didn't get a sniff from Tico. What are you talking about? Hashgraph is the future. Oh, Hashgraph. XRP linked to gold, XLM linked to silver. And I got to figure out what happened to my Stellar. I sent it without the memo. And I think I lost a couple hundred. What coins do you collect? Wow. I am a coin collector. I'll show you what coins I collect. Chainlink, XRP, Flexcoin, Hedera, Holochain. Holochain is very similar to Hashgraph. Ultra, UOS, Stellar, Lumens, Cardano, Zinfin, VeChain, Apollo, ZNN, CoinShares, Digibyte, Litecoin, Zcash, BlockBuy, Dash,